70% of people in the United States have suffered from imposter syndrome at some point in their life. The other 30% don't know that it's called imposter syndrome.
Today we have Dan Faill, a motivational speaker.
I mean, I'm a 6'2" big guy. Never grew up doing sports. I used to always get the like, oh, what sport do you play? What position? Shockingly, I would just be like, I'm in musical theater. And so I can act like I play sports, but that's about where that ends. Research on research that shows that you need certain sleep. Adults need more than the 6-7 hours of sleep. And so finding opportunities and ways to build that in will drastically shift your next day and how well you approach the day.
Dan, if you had one thing that you wanted our audience to take away today, what would it be?
If you're studying for an important test, if you have an important engagement coming up, if you need to drive, catch a flight, if you have a speaking engagement, one of the most important things you could do is
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Blissy Experience. I'm your host, Ariana. We are always so thrilled to have you here with us. We're still early on in this podcast, so we welcome our community members. We're so excited for today's episode. Today we have Dan Faill, a motivational speaker, and I love so much of this conversation. We're going to be talking about things like, of course, night routine, getting our best sleep, which is what we're all about here on the Blissy Experience, but also going a little bit deeper. So without further ado, please meet Dan Faill. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
So excited to chat. I mean, as we were just preparing for this conversation, I am just so excited to dive deeper into both your backstory and then also what you've learned along the way as a speaker, as a father, as a single father. So let's just start with some of that background. You know, you grew up and, came out here. Tell us the story.
Okay, so I'll try to do it in a nutshell. But born and raised in North Carolina. So grew up and, what's interesting, just to kind of tie it into the whole like imposter syndrome piece, really never grew up doing sports. I mean, I'm a 6'2" big guy and I used to always get the like, oh, what sport do you play? What position?
Oh, yeah.
And shockingly, I would just be like, I'm in musical theater. And so I can act like I play sports, but that's about where that ends.
You're like, if my role calls for a football player,
then I can look like I play sports.
Right. I can wear the costume.
Yeah. So like way back in the day, because Dawson's Creek was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina. And so I was on a couple and I was on the football team, which all of my friends thought was hilarious.
Oh, that's perfect.
And so as a teenager doing like the shirts versus skins scene of that football scene, I was like, dibs on shirts because not comfortable.
Right. Yeah.
Like the six pack was always elusive. It's just well insulated now. And so I think
I relate.
Yeah, right. Like growing up in that capacity of, you're not able to bond in the same way. And so if you're
with other guys,
with other guys. And so, you're talking about the weather or you're talking about sports or how the weather affected sports, and I don't think that's basically it. And so part of me often knew that I loved where I grew up. I went to school there as well, but I also knew that I had a bit of a travel bug. And so after college, I ended up traveling as a consultant, led me to Northern California. And I feel like it's the same kind of general story that you meet someone, you end up falling in love, you get married. Like 50% of Americans, I also ended up divorced, but started a family, and she's from Southern California, which is where we are now. And so that just general journey, I think, has helped not just shape me, but has helped refine how I approach life, of just never feeling like I fit in a lot of times. And then I realized that there's a lot of people who feel that way.
Like we don't belong.
That there's something like, when's the other shoe gonna drop? Or, hey, I'm not a great parent right now. Or what if I'm not doing guy right? And so what does it mean to adult? And no one knows. Yeah. And so part of that is
where's
finding
the manual?
your own place.
There is none.
Or people are selling manuals. That doesn't mean that it's correct.
True.
And so I feel like there's a difference of what's expected of us.
Yeah.
And I think now, fascinating in the larger scope of the world, men are trying to figure out where they belong and what that could look like.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a little nugget of what I love to do and how to impact others.
Well, and I just love so much that you are consciously aware of that imposter syndrome as a man when it comes to your masculinity, when it comes to uprooting your life and going somewhere new, and even coming from a background of musical theater, but now being, a professional in the workplace. So, tell me more about how you came to understand that you were experiencing imposter syndrome in the first place.
Oh, gosh. I think the first time, and I didn't know that there was a term with it.
Sure.
And so there was a study done not long ago that said 70% of people in the United States have suffered, quote, suffered from imposter syndrome at some point in their life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the opinion that the other 30% don't know that it's called imposter syndrome.
Right.
But the other fun fact is that also imposter syndrome is really just a collection of feelings. And so the first time that I felt a little bit out of place outside of just the standard weirdness of puberty and high school and some of the college pieces. First time I was at a conference. As a graduate student, I'm there, and there's everyone there that's like conference famous. So they've got their name tags with like 17 different ribbons of like, I'm a donor, I'm this, I'm that.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, oh, I don't have ribbons.
My little lanyard,
like mine just says
so
Dan, right? Like it's all I have. And so they were also, as a fundraiser for the conference, for the foundation, they were selling these Because You Believe stickers.
Okay.
And so people would, and this was old school, so there was a push pin, right? The community board push pin, where you would just say like, oh, it's to Ariana from Dan, like I believe in you. And it was a little like sticker that you could put on your name tag. Put it in the push pin. There it is.
Cute.
And as a grad student, no one knows you. Which just feeds the, I don't know why I'm here. Right. Like I just am not sure.
Yeah.
And so I remember by day 2, I'm checking this board multiple times a day. Does anyone know me? Am I there yet? No, still not.
Wow.
And so I finally bought myself one because it was $5. And I was like, that's either coffee or this Because You Believe sticker. And so in an effort to feel like I fit in, I bought myself a sticker. I wrote my name, but not a from, because I was like, it's from me.
Of course.
And I was like, oh my God, look, it's on the
Did anyone see this?
It's
oh
on
my gosh,
it's on the push pin because I believe in me. But then
I feel like that's kind of when we were in middle school and you would like, you hadn't received a rose yet on Valentine's week. And so
Single Awareness Month is
that's real.
Yes.
That's real.
For sure. Or it's the like, you have to give a Valentine to everyone.
Right.
But that also fits with this overall concept of belonging. We as human beings have an innate sense to want to belong.
Absolutely.
And so at a conference like this, buying this sticker, for me, it meant a lot because I felt like I was part of the inn. So I had this sticker and then eventually started to get more ribbons the more that I continued to be involved in the association and do more service and volunteering and everything. And so it's just really fascinating because I feel like that experience for me, I share with other new professionals that come to this conference, and or really any conference. And so
anywhere.
It's, hey, you're going to feel this way. I'm here as we'll call it seasoned professional. And so being able to help others guide or help them understand that their feelings are valid, and really for imposter syndrome to show up of me just feeling it for the first time, it was important to then recognize that, even though I didn't know that's what it was called. I just felt out of place. And so helping others understand, which is why I became a speaker, is to be able to impact other lives and be able to serve others. And so how can I help us realize that it's just a collection of feelings that show up differently? I identify as a straight white man. It's going to show up different for me than it would for you, than it would for anyone else of differing identities.
Yeah.
And so I think for men, I do a lot of masculinity work now too. And for men to understand and unpack those feelings is important because we don't talk often about feelings or really much in general.
Right.
And so looking at it from those perspectives is going to make a really big difference of feeling like you belong, but then it's going to break down those concepts of vulnerability and authenticity that we often strive for and we say that we want until someone's truly vulnerable and authentic. And you're like, wow, that's uncomfortable. I don't know that I like that.
Yeah, right.
And so you got to unpack a lot of those feelings too.
Yeah. And it's funny how I feel like these more vulnerable topics can feel, I mean, I experience a lot of resistance toward talking about them, but it's also cathartic when you do allow yourself to. That you're like, but actually, this is exactly what I want to talk about. Do you experience that?
I think often, yes. And we can connect in such ways, and we connect in better ways when we share stories that are personal and meaningful to us. I think where we also often need to readjust is what we're sharing. So like Dr. Brene Brown has done this incredible work around vulnerability and authenticity, and realizing that we often will arm or we will use vulnerability as a weapon or as a shield. And so how do we then bond in ways that don't feel like, well, I'm just being authentic. I'm just being vulnerable with you. Like, take it.
Right, yeah.
You wanted it. You've got it all. And so being able to better understand why we're being vulnerable and with whom. Because the shield of vulnerability is, well, I'm not going to be vulnerable with you if you're going to use it against me at some point.
Interesting.
And so I'm not going to share with you because if I share with you and don't know you yet, are you going to use it against me later? But if we start to do this game of sharing back and forth, then we've built a bond or a rapport and trust. And in the sense of trust, then I can let you know at some point, I feel really out of place. I feel like I don't belong here. Why am I, even doing this job? Why was I hired for this job? I'm a horrible parent. No, you're not a horrible parent. You're just a parent.
A parent.
And so, and I
congratulations,
think
you're human.
Right, finding those opportunities for people to connect is important, especially in the day and age where everything feels governed by a phone or by technology. And that has inadvertently created a barrier. It was meant to connect us, but actually we know from studies that we are more alone than ever. We feel more alone, even though we are more connected.
Truly. No, I relate to that a lot. Belonging is something that has always fascinated me. I think it was one of those things where before I even knew what to call it, I felt like I don't belong. I'm different. I felt different than the other kids in my school. I felt different than the other people in my workplace. And that's a really difficult thing to come to terms with, in the first place. I'm curious now that you have been through some years of life, at this age, you're not in high school anymore, kind of avoiding the Skins role in the TV show. How do you find now that imposter syndrome shows up for you in terms of your masculinity?
How much time do we have?
Right.
No, I didn't know this was therapy either, but shout out to therapy.
Welcome to the Blissy Therapy
Exactly.
Experience.
This is, I need a couch. No. So imposter syndrome for masculinity, again, the studies that we're currently seeing in the nation are that men are enrolling in higher education at a far fewer rate or a lower rate than ever before. Yeah. We also know that men, and again, in a college or collegiate experience, are volunteering or doing leadership, running for leadership positions at a less experience or less frequently. So that impact is going to be massive moving forward, but we often then still struggle and stop ourselves from connecting. So in terms of what I like to give others and how I like to unpack that is to not just say it gets better when you're older, because it doesn't. It just changes. Just like we grow up as people.
And probably to some degree solidifies.
It does, unless you know how to do some of the work.
Exactly.
So it is, and I'm not the just journal every day and show gratitude. I'm very snarky. And so that is not my approach to life, because my inner monologue matches my external, which can be very quick and
like
sometimes
we said, authenticity.
Not polite.
Yeah.
And so when you're not polite to yourself, then there's a whole different level to unpack. I think when the older I got, the more I also realized that therapy was important and that doing some of that work is needed.
Absolutely.
Therapy for men and masculinity has this not bad connotation, but just not open connotation.
Sure,
it's not something that we should do, because men apparently are told to be solemn and downtrodden and not share. But I've got a really good friend, James, who says that if vulnerability is seen as a weakness, then why is it so hard? And so for men,
I love that.
Right? And so for men, we don't connect when we want to so badly.
Yeah.
But we stop ourselves from connecting for a fear of being vulnerable and being name called. And that comes back from that middle school, high school, walk it off, shake it off, you're not really that injured. And I'm like, I've broken my fingers in 3 places.
Yeah.
And this is from before. I've literally broken this finger in 3 places.
Oh my gosh.
Hospital, cracked multiple times. And people are like, you're fine, just shake it off. I'm like, it's falling off. I need that help. Yeah. And so to be labeled in such ways is hard to get past. So you have to do some of that inner work and figure out what that looks like. But I also feel like there are opportunities for us to create those connections. And the older we get, as men especially, we know through different research, we don't connect in the same way. It is harder for, quote, adult men to connect, to create those friendships the older we are as opposed to the younger we are. But the younger we are, it's more about, well, what's the next level of social acceptance, or how do I become popular, rather than just how am I going to be? And just be authentically me. And so the best that I can do is model that for my son or model that for my daughter. The way that I continue to explore it personally is, I don't, again, like I said, I don't journal, but I do find different ways to find out kind of well, where am I feeling this from? So in my current moment, I might take a am I really on this thing? Do you really care about what I'm saying? Like, where are these
like
feelings coming from?
Kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And so finding out that moment of, is this where I want to be? What's bringing this feeling on? And is it a feeling of just a lived experience that I need to reflect on? Or do I need to then figure out, well, is there any merit? No, there's no merit. It's just a random feeling that has come up. Okay, well, I'm not going to let that have the driver's seat of my thoughts.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Yeah, and it sounds like it all comes down to reflection. You know, sometimes you could write that down in a journal, or sometimes that could be in your own mind. I mean, I've definitely written journal entries before where I wasn't being vulnerable, where I wasn't reflecting. And, you know, I've had plenty of times where I had amazing assessment and reflection and I wasn't writing it down. So I think the fact that you're doing the work is what really matters.
But it's continuing to work. And I think that's part of it. You don't just do it once and be like, I've arrived, congrats, you know, like finish line of life. And so figuring out what works for you is going to be incredibly important. And then also kind of like the merit-based piece is, well, what are the lies that you end up believing? So let's do a quick experiment.
Okay.
Spell the word believe.
Believe.
Gold star. Great, right? So Believe. Even in the word believe is the word lie.
Okay.
So what are those little lies that we often tell ourselves that we end up becoming the truth or the narrative that we have told? I am not good enough. I don't know why I got hired for this job. That's a lie. You got hired for the job, period. Like they obviously thought that you were qualified. You got hired.
Right, yeah.
So figuring out where those lies come from. Oh, well, and I continue to tell my lie this, and any parents out there might understand this as well, that, oh, well, I don't need as much sleep as I used to. Or like coffee is what keeps me alive and awake.
Right, yeah.
Like, there are so many ways that we tell ourselves little lies every day. And so figuring out what is a lie and what is a truth is important. And that little voice that's in the back of our minds of, you know, I call it my negative Jiminy Cricket. Actually, I call him Johnny Cockroach. And so because it is just this negative piece of like, well, you shouldn't be doing this. I have no clue why he sounds like a smoker, but like, you shouldn't be doing this. And you're not good enough, or like whatever that is. But that's where we have the potential, again, like I said, not let that person be in the driver's seat. Put them in the back seat, put them in the trunk, whatever you need.
Yep.
But wherever that is, note the feeling, note the experience that brought on the feeling, and then you don't have to unpack it in that moment.
Sure.
But you do need to figure out where it's coming from.
Sure.
Because like you said, the reflection is important. But if you look in a mirror, that's often the hardest place for us to look as people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always think of the analogy of the car with my social anxiety. The social anxiety is something that I didn't know the term of until years later, but it's something that I experienced from a very young age. And I noticed that sometimes in my life, I've let it be driving the car. And other times I've been able to move it to the passenger seat, you know, where it's kind of just here in my ear. And then other times moving it to the back seat. And something that I feel like came with maturity, came with more experience, was realizing that there's a reason that my social anxiety is in the car. And it's because that they're trying to protect me. You know, it's coming from a place of humanity, coming from a place of authenticity. And when we actually are ready to do that work, whether it's with a therapist or with a journal or being out in nature, one of my favorite ways to reflect, it's really about asking, you know, what are you trying to help me with? And how can I honor that in a healthier way?
Correct. Well, and it's innate fight or flight.
Yeah.
And so I think most of us, especially when it comes to something like public speaking, most of us might have
the number one fear, by the way.
Correct. Right. Yeah. There are more people who would rather have a root canal than public speak.
And I've done both.
Correct.
They're both scary, but one is actually more painful.
But one takes practice. I think that anyone can be a speaker.
Yeah.
I teach people on how to speak as well because they are like, well, I'm just not going to do it. I'm never going to be good enough.
Right.
Again, the negative self-talk, the negative doubt that comes through.
That fear.
Correct.
Right.
But fear, right, can make more things possible. There's a fear of failure. There's a fear of being an imposter. There's a fear of being discovered. Fears are innate and fears are a constant in the world, right? Death, taxes, change, fear, like these are all going to be constants in life.
What do you mean by fear can help create more opportunities or make more things happen?
I think, again, so let's acknowledge that. I'll just use public speaking as that analogy. I have a fear of public speaking. Okay, but you talk to your friends all the time. Okay, so then how do we push some of the comfort zone?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think too often we stop growing as people, and because we're just comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've learned everything I need to do as a parent, I'm good. I don't need to learn anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always, I think for most parents, have I done a good enough job? Have I given them the right skills for success? At what point do I cut the cord and like let them be and be humans?
Yeah.
And I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. And right now I'm still
age.
the like, I can't do their math. So there's that.
Yeah.
It's just the new maths and everything.
I believe in you. Good luck.
Yes. It's the like, you can do this. Can you help me? No, I can't, but you can FaceTime a friend.
I can't, but you can.
Correct. Like belief. But when it comes to the fear of it, for speaking specifically, there are opportunities where you're not judged. I volunteer for the National Speakers Association. There's Toastmasters, and there are opportunities to develop public speaking skills.
Yeah.
And public speaking doesn't have to be in front of 1,000 people, 2,000 people, 5,000, however many. Public speaking can literally be practiced at a small team meeting, at a family dinner, at an outing with friends. That's public speaking where you address it. For those people who have dinner parties, those are great opportunities to welcome everyone.
Sure.
That is public speaking. And the reason it doesn't maybe feel fearful is because you're comfortable with them.
Yeah.
So how do you create, again, more opportunities, patterns, practice to get you to the point where it is not fear that drives you, but excitement? So there's a lot of people where it's like, oh, my heart's beating out of my chest before I speak and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Well, rather than saying I'm scared of speaking or I'm worried about speaking, I'm excited. So you can reframe and shift that focus of, I'm not worried about what I'm going to say. I'm excited about what I'm going to say. So you can hack your brain to quite literally believe and that I am excited, because we are excited to share that.
And words are powerful. I've heard that I believe that there's scientific evidence behind it as well, that when we feel like butterflies, for example, when you're really scared, you're really nervous, that if you tell your brain, out loud or, internally, oh, I'm so excited. That's what these butterflies are all about. I'm so excited. It's happening.
Yep.
That you can almost trick your brain, and your brain's like, really? Awesome. It's just
and it's finding those opportunities to do all that.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's
putting
often,
yourself in the
takes
situation.
practice.
Yeah. And it sounds like, speaking of what you were mentioning before about, fear can lead to more opportunities. It sounds like what we're really getting at is that oftentimes what we really want is on the other side of our fears. And so going through that is such a beautiful journey and such a beautiful reward.
Yeah. Well, and so there's that analogy that the grass is always greener. Yes, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
But the reason that grass usually is greener is because it's grown through a lot of manure. So it's gone through some stuff.
Right.
I'll let you edit whatever you need to for that editing of the stuff.
Poop emoji here.
So it's the reason that the grass is greener is because of what it's grown through or gone through. And I think for us, knowing that...
And what's fueled it, ultimately.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so knowing that our experiences, and if we can push our comfort zones, then we do open ourselves up to more ideas, possibilities of what could be. But again, we stop ourselves before we start because the thoughts of, well, I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, or I could never, is just not possible. And so we need to... as men, as women, as non-binary, as whatever identities we have more opportunities than we realize, and that we're more capable than we know.
Absolutely. And I think with that negative self-talk, we can set ourselves up for failure without even realizing it. Let's talk about setting ourselves up for success. I know this is something that you work a lot with your audiences, with your clients, something that you've done a lot of, work on and kind of developed your methods and philosophies around. Let's start where we know a lot of our fuel for the day comes from, of course, sleep. Let's talk about setting ourselves up for success when it comes to our lifestyle, when it comes to sleep, hygiene, and then how this all does kind of tie in with masculinity and how you approach sleep as a man.
I still don't approach it well. Let's be honest.
Okay. We like honesty.
There's a lot of growth, authenticity. This is where we're at. For the overall, I guess, where do we start on this one? Let's look at the importance of sleep, period. Right there. And we were joking earlier that there was a an article that like how Jennifer Aniston stays looking as great as Jennifer Aniston does at the age that she is. And there was 4 different things. I forget one of them, but it was drink a lot of water, eat healthy, sleep. And again, I probably the other one was working out or the gym.
Sure.
There's only 24 hours in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all, I'm busy. Right? I'm a single dad. Thankfully, I've got a really good ex-wife, a spouse emeritus, as it were, right? Like and we co-parent well, thank goodness.
Awesome.
But I know that that's not everyone's experience. But figuring out that, well, you're supposed to do work because bills.
Right.
I should spend time with kids because parenting. I guess I should make dinner, but really it's easier to just pick up something.
Right.
And so if we can acknowledge that there's no more time going to be built into the day.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a fixed amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So then what are the patterns, the routines that we have that we can change?
Mm-hmm.
My son and I were joking in the car the other day. He had giant bags under. I mean, I'm talking like luggage, like ready to go.
At 12?
At 12. Oh, yeah. Now,
poor guy.
I think part of this is, and I jokingly said, I was like, well, you know why you got bags under your eyes? He was like, you're going to tell me I need more water. I'm like, yeah, and to go to sleep earlier.
Yeah.
Now, part of it is bedtime is at a certain time. I do okay, let's take away electronics. And by take away, I mean plug them in at the other side of the room. But I also don't follow up on that because I'm also all right, they're in bed. Now I can shower.
Now I get to decompress.
Well, and in some cases, like I don't just work one job. I've got multiple different hustles because hustle, society, which is not great.
But it's
but I'll
expensive,
go back to work. Yeah.
Like I think a lot of our audience can relate having to work more than one job. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, why are eggs so expensive?
Right.
Like why would what 5 years ago would be $100 in groceries is $2.50 now? Like
it's incredible.
Inflation
and it impacts,
is not the thing.
Yeah, most of us.
And that anxiety is going to affect how we sleep.
Yeah.
Or when we sleep.
Absolutely.
Or how well we sleep. And I think finding those opportunities. So again, I'll crank out work until 9, 10, 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that my kids are in the other room, probably doom scrolling a little too much.
Right.
And so it's the set an alarm. Let's go from here. Like what else is needed for them?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we were chatting, I think part of it came back to, buddy, you just need more sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, I'm not tired at night, which I 100% relate to because I am a night owl.
Sure.
I'll stay up until 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Sadly, we'll have to wake up to take them to school. Not sadly. I will wake up to take them to school, but if I'm going to bed at midnight and getting them up to make sure they're ready for school at 6:30, that's a little early. So I am not getting a good night's sleep. Mm-hmm. Now, again, you can stop drinking caffeine at noon. You can stop eating at a certain time. No more screens after a certain time. Again, those are patterns that are hard to develop, especially if, to your point, I just want to decompress.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's a movie for people. Sometimes it's a book. It just really depends.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can find ways to make a habit a better pattern. And so there's the like atomic habits and some of those pieces where it's you do it for 30 days and you're in a much better spot. So where can we do that? And as parents, my kids don't fully know it yet, but like we're going to get some healthier snacks in the room.
Yeah.
Right? And I keep continuing to say it, and then Oreos go on sale as opposed to eggs. And so I will end up buying that because that's an easier one. I'm like, you know what? I want a treat for adulting too.
Sure.
Like we've all had a day. Let's have 2 Oreos.
Yeah.
Okay, 3. And so finding ways for them to be comfortable. My daughter has, I don't even know how many pillows in her bed.
Okay.
She needs to be comfortable when she sleeps. And I can literally hear her just being like, like as she lays down.
I love it.
And as a parent, that's what you want, for them to feel comfortable enough to just fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
My son has that problem. So we've tried different. Is it a different bed? Is it a bigger bed? Is it, different sheets? Is it a new pillow? Is it different pillows? Is it a hard pillow and a soft pillow? I'm still figuring out what works for me.
Totally.
Am I a side sleeper? Am I a back sleeper? Am I a stomach sleeper? I'm all over the place.
If I can't fall asleep, what is it that is triggering that the most?
Correct.
It's hard to know.
Yeah. When I told my kids to download an app of just like noise, of like there's the white noise and then there's the rainfall or whatever, what they laughed. I'm like, but I put on the app and it's called brown noise for some reason.
Yeah,
and
I've heard of this.
I put it on. I'm out.
Really?
But what I don't do is I don't put on the airplane noise because I fly a lot. And so I try to stay awake and do work on the airplanes.
Right.
Or
It's
I'll
an
watch a movie.
association thing.
Yes. But the brown noise, for some odd reason, I am out within maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, now I'm just really curious for our community chat. Tell us if you have tried brown noise and how you like it. I've heard of it. It sounds like it works really, really well, so tell us.
Yeah. Don't sleep on it. But that's intended pun, not an unintended one.
Don't sleep on brown noise. So I know that you have had a personal experience with a silk pillowcase. Tell me about that.
Okay. All right. So there was a time not long ago that I was dating a woman, and I remember going to sleep at her house for basically the first time, and I see these pillowcases.
Okay.
And I remember laying down thinking, I'm going to like slip and slide off of this because it just felt so slippery. And I asked her, I was like, what is the deal? Because the sheets were different than the pillowcase. I was like, what is the deal with these pillowcases?
Right.
And she was like, oh, these are special pillowcases that are da-da-da. And she told me all about them.
Uh-huh.
And I probably should have listened more than I did.
Sure.
But I do remember her saying that it helped with her sleep and it helped with her complexion. And just, I was like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I had a choice of, can you just get like the t-shirt or the cheap one from whatever,
right.
from where other room. And so fell asleep, woke up and I'm, okay. So I will also say that I'm like a little furnace.
Okay.
I'm like a miniature furnace that I'm very warm,
yeah.
right? Like I glisten when I sleep. Okay. Like let's just leave it at that. And so I was worried that I was going to also mess up, i.e. sweat on her very nice, expensive pillowcases.
Right.
But I wasn't going to say that because it was like the first time spending the night.
Right.
And so I kept a lot of like fear in.
Oh.
Of like.
How was your sleep that night?
Not great.
Yeah.
In terms of trying to fall asleep.
Right.
But once I was out, waking up and there was a different sense of refreshment. And part of it, I think, was, nice sheets, nice bed, nice pillowcase, company, whatever. But then part of it was also the like, I wonder.
Maybe
and again,
to this.
I'll acknowledge the male privilege of I don't have to think about makeup when I wake up or fall asleep or right, like any of the standard getting ready or taking makeup or anything off. And so part of it for her was, well, when you take makeup off, like your face needs the ability to breathe, and those types of pillowcases allowed for that in a better sense. And so yes, slept better, woke up.
Wow. And
like I remember waking up before her and was just like checking the pillow. Okay. I'm like, okay, the pillow's in good condition. We're good there. I was like, okay, here's where we're at. And then I tried to pretend to sleep again. But knowing that I just never thought about it. And so when I spent the night over there, it was kind of looking forward to the pillowcases.
Oh my gosh.
At that point,
Tell me, how much longer did you date because of the pillowcase?
I will say she ended up calling it off.
Okay.
But I'm not
Fair.
saying that I would have stayed with her for the pillowcases. I would say that was an added incentive or bonus.
We love a bonus.
But it was a mutual breakup at that point. But I think it was, again, I'm not saying I do often wish her the best and wish her the best if she ever figures out who this is. But I think about those pillowcases though.
Yeah. Well, and I think like I always think about, things that I took away from past experiences, whether it was a past relationship or, even seeing something in a hotel room. I'm like, you know what? Actually, I would have never thought to buy that for myself. But it turns out that that's something that I actually really did enjoy, that may have brought something new into my routine, and coming back to the whole masculinity piece, you were mentioning with male privilege, of course, you don't have to think about certain things. But at the same time, do you find that there are opportunities that you like to discover as you get older to treat yourself more as a male? Like self-care, does that enter your life at any point?
Oh yeah. I will say that in general, I carry a lot of tension in my shoulders and everything. And for me, the treat myself really comes back to, I'm gonna get a massage, or the treat myself in the pre-pandemic world was, I'm gonna go to the gym several times a week. And so I think in a self-care capacity, again, you try things until you find something that you like.
Absolutely.
And so is it journaling? Great, self-care. Is it reading a book? Great, self-care. Is it going to the beach? Great, self-care.
Yeah.
I did not practice self-care this past weekend. I was in Hawaii for a good friend's wedding. I was there for 48 hours and did not put my feet in the sand once.
Oh no.
Travesty. For certain travesty.
I'm so sorry.
Loved my experience. Like so happy that I was, ability to be in the wedding with people that I've not seen in so long. So that was great. But then for me, self-care is a great beach, the sound of waves and ocean, water, good people, friends.
Yeah.
So I don't practice self-care as much as I want to. But I think the older that I've gotten, the more that I've also prioritized self-care. Because most people are just like, well, self-care is selfish. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Or self-care is feminine.
And that's okay. Yeah. And it's the, I joked with my daughter at one point too that I was like, well, let's go get mani-pedi. I've never had one. I'm like, Is it an excuse for me to get one? Maybe. But like, I've never had one. Sure. Will I go on my own? I don't know.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
But if I can use my daughter as a bit of an excuse and treat her to one as well, cool. Or my son.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
And so I just think that there's opportunities that we stop ourselves from having, or that there's opportunities that we could have, or just haven't even thought of yet. So is it a massage? Is it this? Is it that? I fly a lot. So, I just ended up getting gifted for my birthday last week, got a gift of the airport massages. So I have like a year pass, unlimited pass.
No way.
Yes. So
I am so jealous.
I'm usually one of those people that gets to the airport and like through TSA, boom, now I've checked in and I'm on the plane. Like it is quick. I am now going to be that person who gets to the airport a solid hour in advance. Yeah. And I will be the kid from Disney who just gets back on the ride. I'm like, chair massage, bet. 15 minutes are up. I'm going to get back in line. Scan me again. Let's go. Yeah. So again, it just looks different for different people, and that's okay. But it's not selfish.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said, that self-care can be so many things. And I, as a woman, when I hear self-care, I admittedly probably associate it more with women. I think we just talk about it more often, talk about it more publicly. And going back to what you were saying about vulnerability as a man, that yes, you are a man, but first and foremost, you're a human being.
Correct.
Well,
and let's expand on that let's go one step further. For us, for men specifically, or male identifying people, we don't take those opportunities because it is seen as feminine, but it is not.
Right.
But again, like the industry, ironically, which men have defined, but that beauty industry hasn't catered to that. I'm like, you have missed out on a vast majority of the population by also doing some of this. I got a friend, Jameson, who's his self-care skin routine, he glistens. I mean, in just this great way of like, he glows in like this freshness. And he's like, do you know how much money I paid for that eye cream? And I'm like,
men also have skin.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I think finding those opportunities are important, but let's look at it from just even bonding or talking. I think if we reframed self-care, just similarly to mental health, right? I think too often it's like, well, my mental health is fine.
Right.
I'm fine.
Right.
Okay. Fine is not mental health. Right. Fine, it's not a thing. And so knowing that we've got opportunities to really kind of expand or at least pull apart what that could be. I think that if we viewed, for men specifically, I think if we viewed mental health more like physical health, right? So if I go to the gym and I'm going to lift something really heavy, what am I supposed to have? A spotter. Right? So I'm about to hit the bench press. I'm supposed to have a spotter. That's what especially because the spotter's job is to make sure that I don't drop something really heavy on myself and injure myself.
Yeah.
What if we had emotional spotters too? Right? So I think if for men, if we can almost reframe what that support looks like.
Yeah.
Because again, we're just used to talking about sports, or we're used to talking about whatever, or we vent around what's happening, but we often don't connect in a true level. It's just the surface level conversations. And so if we can break down what is out there, if we can break down that barrier of the vulnerability piece to really connect, to say, hey man, your skin looks good. What you doing? Right? Or like,
or you're like glowing from the inside. Like, what kind of inner work are you doing?
Like what's happening with you right now? It's like, I just went on this great retreat, Because I think that I think that, again, men want to share more. Yeah. I think we just stop ourselves, or we don't want to be perceived as, quote, less than or feminine or whatever identity feels like a non-masculine identity.
Right.
But again, we're all people. We all have skin. We all need sleep, regardless of how much we get. So what does that actually mean and look like? And how do we prioritize self-care, mental health, and reframe it in a way that makes sense for us? Because we could talk sports all day long. Doesn't mean I follow it.
Right.
It was never on at home for me, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's just not something that you find interest in. Well, and I think maybe this is an overstatement, but to some degree, I personally believe, because I'm very interested in kind of what's going on in the male demographic these days. Especially, I do a lot of research in belonging and connection, and like you were mentioning earlier, there is such a need for belonging and connection, especially with young males, and yet we don't have space for that. So I think to some degree it comes to pioneering this, because women of course we do a lot of the work, but it's modeled for us. It exists already. And so we can build upon that. Of course we can develop that further. But I feel like for men, even when you and I were growing up, it's not like it was really modeled for us.
Correct.
Do you feel like that there is kind of an innovative, pioneering approach to discovering what self-care means to you?
Yeah, I think it's all about terminology. So if you can, it's not, and I've got a friend who I would consider a mental health speaker and expert in this, and just the way that we can give people better terms to use, or that we can stop using terms that are either outdated or right. And it's so common for us to say, oh, wow, that's crazy. Or you stop being so crazy right now. Okay, well, that's, this is not like a cancel movement. This is let's be more cognizant of our words, kind of like what you said. So in an effort to belong, what are the resources, terminology, actions, whatever that looks like? And so for men, we've not had the ability, I think, to understand the terms, or we have just cast them aside because we are supposed to be X, Y, and Z, and that is it. And we've not allowed ourselves to be seen in different ways, which I think is what we're seeing now just in general in the country, is that men are trying to figure out, well, what is our path? Masculinity wasn't really even a term that was, invented or discovered or researched until after World War II. So we have just not done a great job even understanding the male role, because the male role completely redefined after World War II.
Yeah, wow.
Men went off to war. Women went to the factories to keep America running. Men came back and they were like, we're ready for our jobs back. And the ladies were like, no, we're good.
Yeah.
Like, we want to keep doing this.
Sure.
We want to continue to serve. And I think we as men have struggled with, well, what is our next place?
Yeah.
And there's some incredible researchers and some incredible authors out there. Richard Reeves right now is probably one of my favorites. He just did a book called Of Boys and Men. And it, for me, has helped reframe how I'm showing up, what I do for work, and then how I'm raising both kids.
Yeah.
Of just, okay, well, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
And so it's just again, daily habit, daily pattern, things that we can find. I'll talk to my daughter specifically when I pick her up from high school and just be like, hey, so how's the day? And I'll ask her different types of questions. I'll ask my son similar, but different types of questions. I'll ask them collectively. I'll ask them separately. So if I drop her off at high school and then I'm dropping him off at middle school, then I will ask him different framed questions that are basically the same.
Sure.
But it's approached in a way that also allows him the ability to say like, no, I'm not really comfortable sharing that right now. Cool, you don't have to, bud.
Yeah.
But I'm going to revisit it tomorrow because I know something's bugging you.
Yeah.
And so if they know that you're coming from a place of care, whether that's a friend, parent, loved one, whatever, and you know that you're not going to let them get away with, hey, how's everything going? I'm fine.
Yeah.
Just busy, just stressed.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, why?
Right.
And that's often the follow-up that we throw away. It's oh, fine. I'm just busy. And then all of a sudden, if I ask how you doing and you say busy, oh my gosh, yeah, me too. I've got this and I got this and I got this.
Right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's a contest.
Yeah.
No one gets a badge for being the busiest. So
Yeah.
can we stop comparing ourselves in that way? And so if we can acknowledge that we've all got life going on, but rather than me trying to quote bond or one up you, what if I just said, wow, like what's making life so busy right now? But we don't take the time to do that.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I think that busyness competition is very real. I think, fortunately we're starting to realize it, and kind of talk about it. And this reminds me also of just mental health in general, how important it is for so many that is finally becoming, a little bit more of the mainstream conversation. And what you were saying about, physical health and mental health, it kind of makes me almost think like if you were to talk to a guy and be like, hey, how's your physical health? And they're like, yeah, it's good, period. Versus like, oh yeah, like I hit the gym, I'm growing, I'm developing, I'm pushing myself, I'm discovering new weaknesses. Like that is what working out is. That's what going to the gym is all about. So I wonder why, and tell me your thoughts from a guy's perspective, why is it that maybe we're so open about wanting to improve our physical health and grow in that area, but when it comes to our mental health, it's just like, good.
I don't even know that we check the good box.
Yeah, or just like fine, like it's fine, but like where is the gym for mental health?
Exactly. Therapy is where that I would say the biggest heavy lifts happen.
Right.
I think coming back to number one, I don't speak for all men, so let's put
sure, yes.
But from a guy's perspective, I think as we check the physical health boxes, we also know that men are more visual people. So we are going to judge ourselves based off our physical prowess or how we look more so than how we feel.
Sure.
Because we can put on a suit and look good even if we feel like garbage.
Right.
Or the negative self-talk that ends up happening is, well, if I just do this, then this can happen. Or if I have jokingly said that, I'm not genetically predispositioned to have like abs. But if I did enough work, I potentially could. But your boy likes hamburgers, okay?
But you're also seemingly, fit. So I think that it's
girl,
not so much about there's one.
I'm literally like repositioning to see like no one likes the way they look sitting down. A. B, like if I don't have to take off a shirt at the pool, I won't. I was in the best shape of my life in 2019, right before the pandemic. And we were joking earlier, I bought all the home gym stuff when the pandemic hit. Guess how often I've used it? None.
Yeah. Home gyms aren't for everybody. Yeah.
They're not. And I could fix that pattern. I have a garage with everything in it right now. I have a jump rope. I have never used said jump rope. I also, at 6'2", I'm like trying to do jump rope and it's going to hit a ceiling. So I'm like, I live in an apartment, so whatever. I've got so many excuses. And that's where some of us get comfortable is an excuse to not go to the gym, an excuse to not eat healthy, right? But we also know that you lose weight in the kitchen, you get fit in the gym. Those two often aren't talked about at the same time. And so for men, it's much easier for me to put on a facade, or if I start to gain weight, I can go up a pant size and still look skinny because you're gonna be like, oh my God, you look like you're fitting, like everything looks so much looser on you. Yeah, it's called going to an extra large as opposed to the larges that I used to wear, which show off some dad bod. I know my secret to hide the physical appearance. And I think men, again, with the visual piece, it's easier to project that than to do the internal work because, again, we've been told that the internal work is not men's work.
Right.
So that's, I think, again, part of the general society shift in the last, let's call it 30 years, but truly in the last, let's call it decade.
Yeah, interesting. I want to talk more about kind of being a single dad and imposter syndrome there. I mean, you were mentioning there's not really a universal manual anyway for being a parent. How do you deal with that as a single dad? Some
days really well. Other days I'm worried that I am going to have to give them a lot of money for therapy later on. I think
John and I joke about we'll do a college fund and a therapy fund for all our kids.
But wouldn't that be great, right? If I could do a Roth IRA and some financial stuff for college and some here's your mental health or mental wellness, right? Like here's your 3 funds that you get, but you can access, especially the mental health one anytime.
Right.
And I do remember, I'm going to try to not get emotional in this one. I remember going through the divorce and the kids were so young at that time that they didn't really understand. And my son was so young. I think he was like 3. And so looking back and even currently, I do feel like there's more therapy that's needed for both kids to understand. And for me, I knew that I wanted the kids to know happy parents. That just weren't married anymore. That was my priority is for the kids were first. And if I can set aside ego, which is very difficult to do, if I can set aside ego, then things will, in theory, quote, get better. I think for me as a dad now, I try to model when I'm having, if I'm having a bad day, I let the kids know. Hey, look, I'm snapping. I just, I'm short fused right now because I'm having a rough day or a rough time or whatever. And I let them know, I give words to my feelings so that they also know where I'm at.
And I love that you give words, not excuses, but you give an explanation.
I mean, I still give both, let's be honest.
But the fact that you also help them understand from, just a genuine, explanation perspective.
And I want them to be able to say and I'll ask my daughter, how was your day? It was okay. Okay, well, what about your day was okay? And again, it's that follow-up question. And we throw away the follow-ups every day with every single conversation. And so if I can model just a better way, and not to say that my dad never asked me some of these questions, I just feel like there's more work that we've done in this, quote, generation that will continue to happen. But I want to be able to show my kids that it's okay to cry. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to have a good day. It's okay to celebrate successes. I remember, this was not even that long ago, I crushed crushed a keynote for a group here in Los Angeles. I mean, I'm talking, I felt cloud nine great. But I travel a lot. I don't have a lot of local friends. I got friends all across the United States.
Sure.
I don't have a lot here in this city. And I picked up my daughter from school and I was like, Munchkin, I got to tell you this. And I was like exploding with excitement to share it. And she was like, cool, Dad. Like, good day at work. Double high five emoji, right? Like whatever.
Yeah.
And so there was that aspect of being able to share the joy, but also being able to share the, I'm not great right now. Dad's tired.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, well, just get your coffee. I'm like, Dad's had enough coffee already, but I'm just tired. Like, and this was actually, you know, quite honestly, the couple of days ago that I had a very similar, like, y'all, I'm exhausted. You know, I just returned from a wedding in this beautiful location and everything, but that was a lot of travels. Being able to, again, not only model the way, but give your kids, for me at least, the ability to say, I'm also not having a good day and I don't want to talk about it right now.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't have to talk about this right now, but we're going to visit it soon, either before bed or in the morning or at some other point. I've also given my kids, and I wrote this hand note. I saw this somewhere, probably doom scrolling, but I saw this note and I kind of modeled it. It said, if there's ever anything that you need to talk about, bring me this note and I promise to not get upset. And
I love that.
And while cleaning out / doing laundry, I have found both notes in their like cupboards. I didn't come from, I used to blow up at them pretty quickly and frequently. Like I'm short-tempered, short-fused in some capacities, especially when we're stressed.
Yeah.
Not that is an excuse.
But it's an acknowledgement.
Yeah. And after the fact, I've made a lot of apologies. Again,
Awesome.
I try to contextualize it, but I feel like also when I contextualize, it's giving excuses. But I try to say like, I shouldn't have done that. Like my daughter and I got into a screaming match within the last year. And she, like, I asked her something and she yelled a response back, but it was done in a tone in a way that I was like, no. And so I then snapped / yelled back because I can be pretty loud. And so I yelled back and then she yelled back. And I was like, why are we yelling at each other? Like, I don't understand right now. And then I'm venting to my son, who I should not be doing, or not be venting with, because that's not helpful or healthy. And I was like, what is going on? And I know that I'm loud enough for my daughter to hear. It was just this like.
Do you know the scene? Does anyone know the scene in the chat here? The Steve Carell scene from Anchorman when he's like, I don't know what we're yelling about.
Loud noises. Yes. But it's so true. And thankfully I came back like an hour later. I was like, my tone and my volume was not warranted. And I'm really sorry about that. But here's what you also did. But it was this like, and we laughed about it after the fact, thank goodness. But it's just those moments that the more that we can, again, give name or words to our feelings, I think the better that we'll end up doing in the future.
Yeah. If you haven't had a chance yet to experience the Blissy silk pillowcase, I am telling you, once you experience it, it's really hard to go back. With the holidays coming up, I want to also mention that this makes a great gift. This is awesome for stocking stuffers. It's awesome for the kids in your life, whether it's your own kids, nieces and nephews. Also great for men who don't even realize that they have skin and therefore also deserve to take care of their skin. So be sure to check this out if you haven't experienced it yet, or if you have and you just want to pass on the love, check out Blissy. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe so that you can enjoy our weekly episodes. We are absolutely loving the community that we're building here. It's so important to us that you are here. So please be sure to check out all our other episodes. Dan, if you had one thing that you wanted our audience to take away today, what would it be?
Let's see. You know what? I feel like as played out as this might sound, the best thing that you can do if you're studying for an important test, if you have an important engagement coming up, if you need to drive, catch a flight, if you have a speaking engagement, whatever that could look like, I do think one of the most important things you could do is get a good night's sleep. There's research on research that shows that you need certain sleep. Both teens need more sleep than adults, but adults need more than the 6-7 hours of sleep.
Absolutely.
And so finding opportunities and ways to build that in, I think will drastically shift your next day and how well you approach the day.
We always say sleep is your superpower. It really sets you up for success. So thank you so much. I loved our conversation. Thank you so much for imparting your stories, your vulnerability, your wisdom with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and also let us know in the chat if you have questions, if you have things that you related to about what we talked about, and also if you have other guests in mind or types of experts that you would like to hear from, please let us know. We always read the chat and we want to be here for you and what you want to talk about. Thank you so much for enjoying this episode with us. I'm your host, Ariana, and this has been the Blissy Experience. We'll see you on the next one.